Well, this year's Tour de France amended its regulations to allow teams of 8 riders instead of 9 in order to make it more competitive. Amazing, right? So the decision was defended by Tour de France director Christian Prudhomme, who cited safety concerns and the race's liveliness. UCI and other big events, including the Giro and Vuelta in España, suggested the modification in 2017 and have since adopted it as a standard procedure. Welcome back to Cycling Right Now, you all. Let's get into the details in the video without delaying it any further. But before that, please hit the bell icon and subscribe to the channel to get every single update about the channel. Formula One is a typical example of a major athletic event making rule changes to increase safety, spectacle, fairness, or even potential business interests, despite the fact that the move was unpopular. Recently, Copenhagen, Denmark hosted the 109th edition of the Tour de France, which began on July 1st. However, there is also a resurgence of interest from the audience. This year's Tour de France has drawn the attention of many people who believe that it was better in the before era when the races were less predetermined, with more excitement and drama. Because technology hadn't yet taken over from the human aspect, it's assumed that classic cycling epics like those seen in these black and white photos were possible. Tour de France legend Roland Barthes described the Tour de France as a new myth and related it to the value of collectively held ideas that were developed in the past. The Tour de France is sometimes accused of being dulled by technology, such as radio headsets that convey directions from team management and components that assess riders' power. We began debating the effect of radios on race results more than a decade ago, and the discussion continues today. It has been progressively decreasing in previous years, but this year's Tour de France had an overall audience of 42.4 million, a new record. Since the past 2 editions were won by Slovenian cyclist Tadej Pogačar, the event has been made more dynamic with the introduction of half stages, bonuses for time, jerseys, intermediate sprints, and other measures. Is this a sign that the Tour de France has grown more exciting to watch as a result of these changes? The significance of the yellow jersey is a matter of debate. For the purpose of continuity, we will begin our research with data from the 1969 Tour, which saw the return of branded teams after a hiatus of more than 5 decades. The average pace of the race has grown over the last 50 years, but the overall distance has dropped, currently at slightly under 41 kilometers per hour. The riders are also more prepared than ever before, with better gear, more organized teams, and a higher level of training. The Tour de France's dropout rate has been steadily decreasing over the last few years, proving that the participation of team members is more important than ever. The proportion of final dropouts and the average final speed is shown in the following graph. We can also see that the average margin between the eventual winner and the runners-up has decreased significantly. There has been a widening difference between winners over the previous 5 decades, as seen in this graph. Is this a hint that the race is growing increasingly competitive? Such an interpretation should be avoided because the gaps may be controlled while minimizing the danger thanks to the efforts of the team members who manage the race. In other words, how can we tell if a Tour de France is actually contested and enjoyable to watch? As a result of deliberately ignoring stage victories and jerseys, a lot of attention is paid to the war for the yellow jersey, the first in the time classification. To put it another way, if the yellow jersey is up for grabs, the race will be more interesting to watch. The yellow jersey's uncertainty stems from 2 factors: the wide variety in the number of riders who wear it, and the difficulty of closing the gaps at the end of the race. The age of controlled tours began in the decade of the 2010s. Using data from the website procyclingstats.com, we calculated the number of different yellow jersey holders for each tour, the number of days the final winner held the jersey, the number of stages on which the last yellow jersey changed hands, and finally, as shown above, the final gaps between the first 3 finishers in each race. The following diagram shows how the 51 Tour de France since 1969 have been ranked and positioned by a study. Although the 7 victories won by U.S. cyclist Lance Armstrong have been removed owing to doping, the data has been kept for statistical study. Based on the extent of the gaps and the variety in yellow jerseys, the Tour de France are arranged in this manner. Chart, the author has supplied the details. There are 4 tours that dominate the top left quadrant, marked in red, large gaps in a few different yellow jerseys. These are known as locked races, and they tend to be the least exciting to watch. Many 1970s tours were won by Belgian champion Eddy Merckx, and we'll uncover enough of those. The last time a tour was locked was in 2014, when Italian Vincenzo Nibali won after a number of favorites pulled out due to injury. A huge gap exists between the riders in the yellow jersey in the top right quadrant, shown in orange, and those in the red jersey, shown in blue. This was a common pattern in the 1980s when enormous gaps were formed. Open and then closed tours are offered here. The tours in the bottom left quadrant, blue, illustrate tours in which the final gaps are lower, but the yellow jersey is in greater control. The control tours of the 2010s are dominated by the British team Sky, with Bradley Wiggins, Christopher Froome, and Geraint Thomas winning the 3 stages of the Tour de France. This category is tied to the racing patterns of Spain's Miguel Indurain in the 1990s. The winner doesn't need to open a large margin because of the quality of his squad and his dominance of the time trial. It is methodical race management in which marginal gains prove crucial and suspense is short-lived. Because the final margin was so close and there was so much diversity in yellow jersey winners in the bottom right quadrant, we consider these Tour de France to be the most fascinating. They include 1983, Laurent Fignon's first victory with 20 different stage winners, 1987, Irishman Stephen Roche and his neck-and-neck race with Spanish rival Pedro Delgado, 1989, which ended with American Greg LeMond winning by only 8 seconds over Laurent Fignon, and 1990, Irishman Stephen Roche and his neck-and-neck race with Spanish rival Pedro Delgado, also won by LeMond. The triumph of Colombian Egan Bernal and France's Julien Alaphilippe were welcome surprises in the 2019 Tour de France. In the recent past, managed tours have dominated, as seen by our results, races where the margins are minimal but the ultimate victor appears fairly early on, the 2010s. Every aspect of life cannot be explained solely by technology. Yes, cycling officials are correct to modify the regulations of the races in order to foster greater dynamism, but the tours from the golden days were not always more thrilling. Certainly the narrowing of the distances between the frontrunners shows that the recent Tour de France have demonstrated stronger control of the race. The winner, without fail, maintains his opponents at a safe distance. The prohibition of technology, earpieces, power meters, GPS, may make sense, but the contemporary trend is comparable to that of the 1970s when such informative tools were unavailable. Technology cannot explain everything, and it seems more logical to regulate the composition of racing teams rather than outlaw the use of any technology at all. The viewer's opinion of the race also seems to be key to better understanding the challenge. Historically, the Tour has been a race that has been exaggerated by the written press, and subsequently by radio, which has capitalized on a few race details to explain what the public could not see. In addition to cameras, GPS transponders mounted on the bikes and real-time data processing, everyone can see exactly where the riders are at all times. In economic theory, uncertainty is predicated on a lack of information. The viewer is becoming less and less unsure, which alters his or her impression of the race. Races that don't have any actual combat will be viewed as less exciting, while those that feature a lot of action will be viewed as more enjoyable. Viewers and media outlets' access to new technology will only serve to amplify this phenomenon's impact on how events are perceived. As a result, it is even more critical that the rules be changed, maybe in a heuristic manner, to stimulate the creation of interesting race events. Seeing where the 2022 Tour ends up in terms of quadrants will be an intriguing exercise. That's all for today's video. We will meet you with such interesting information like this in the next video. Do give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.